everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Tainted Child and today we are going to answer a question. Will I be able to beat Final Fantasy X using only the girls? This means that throughout the entire run we will only have access to Yuna, Rikku, Lulu and the 4 female aeons, Valefor, Shiva, Anima and the Magus Sisters. The only time that we will be able to use the male characters is if the game forces us to do so. And in situations where there are men on the team, they are only allowed to defend or flee. And finally, only the ladies will have access to the sphere grid and they will be able to freely move between their own and the grids of other characters, both male and female. If you would like to try this challenge yourself, or if you're just interested in finding out about the rules in more detail, make sure you check out the description below. I will put everything you need to know in there. And now it's time to answer the question. Can I beat Final Fantasy X only using the girls? So, before we can begin the run officially, first of all we have to get through the tutorial. We call Tidus not a girl because it's fitting for the run, and we sit back and watch as Sin rudely interrupts his blitzball game and destroys Zanarkand. Now unfortunately there's no way to bypass the tutorial that I am aware of, especially on console, so we just get through it as quickly as possible. Auron and Not a Girl take down Cosmic Squidward with no problems whatsoever, and then they both work together to destroy the bridge to take care of the rest of the fiends that are flying around all over the place. After an epic explosion and some running around, we are pulled into the Devil's Anus and transported to the world of Spira. After this we swim around in the waters of Barge Temple, where we are forced into another mandatory boss fight. This is a scripted loss, so all we can do is try not to get ourselves swallowed, and after making some fire we are attacked by the Clicker. Again, we have no choice but to use Not a Girl in this fight, but it's really simple, it's just some back and forth, and as you can see I was lucky enough to get some double hits in, making it a lot easier. I continue this back and forth for a while until we realise we need some help, and luckily the first female character is available now, and that is the lovely Albed, Rikku, who comes to our rescue. Rikku has always been one of my favourite characters to use in this game due to her superior speed stats and agility, but unfortunately in this particular challenge we do have a huge downside with her, and that's her abysmal strength stat, which is something that I'm going to have to work on as we go along, as she will be our main source of physical attack, as well as acting as our thief and stealing items that we will desperately need to make our life easier. Now we have access to Rikku, there is nothing Not a Girl can do in this fight other than defend. So we make sure that Rikku grabs herself tons of grenades, as this will be her main source of attack when it comes to taking down the enemies due to her lack of strength. And as you can see, Rikku has no problem taking this thing down solo. Not a Girl, however, thinks that he's going to get lucky here, but ends up getting a kick to the nads because our girls need no man. After this really awkward encounter with Brother, where we play Albed charades, we find ourselves at the sunken airship. Once again, Not a Girl is forced to defend throughout this entire ordeal, whilst Rikku farms for grenades, as once again this is her only means of attack, and also I take the time to max out her overdrive so we are able to use the mix ability when we come across our next boss. Not a Girl tries to impress Rikku and prove his worth by bashing a few buttons inside the sunken airship. However, this means absolutely nothing to us because we are once again going to save his arse. Now usually with this boss it would be a tag team effort between Tidus and Rikku to take it down using trigger commands. However, it only takes a couple of grenades smashed together in the mix ability to be able to take it down. It didn't even have the opportunity to attack us. That's how effective that this was. And to be honest with you, I surprised myself with how easily this boss went down. I honestly thought it was going to take a bit more effort than that. So we take the win, and unfortunately we lose Rikku now as Sin knocks Not a Girl off the boat and he gets sucked into a whirlpool. We are now in Besaid, where Not a Girl befriends the captain of the Besaid Aurochs, Waka, who is very impressed by the way he handles his balls. And then we go round the corner to grab ourselves the Moon Crest. After this, our new best friend decides to push us off a cliff, which in my opinion is incredibly rude considering we've only just met. The boys spend some time paddling around in the oasis, and there is nothing else they can do other than run from the fish, as the boys can't actually engage in any battles here. Then we go to the Cloister of Trials, where we meet our second lady of the run, Yuna. Yuna is not alone, however, as we also gain access to our first female Aeon, Valefor, who I decided to call Pidgeot because I decided to go with a Pokemon theme for this run. We also gain access to my favourite female character of the game, Lulu, our Black Mage. I then spend an ungodly amount of time running around trying to talk to this dog to gain access to Valefor's secondary overdrive, forgetting that I have to talk to this lady first before the dog will hand it over, so that was embarrassing to say the least. But now we are forced into some more tutorials with the boys. Again, there is absolutely nothing we can do about this, we just try to get through it as quickly as possible. Something interesting does happen here though. Waka actually becomes blinded when he is attacked by the bird. Now I've never actually seen this before, I've never seen it happen in the tutorial stage, and as you can see I had tons of problems taking this bird down. Now it should have just been a one shot, but for some reason we ended up getting a bad roll and Waka was blinded. Lulu however takes down her flan with no problems at all, and now we face off against Kimhari, where once again it's a mandatory battle, there's nothing we can do about it. Not a Girl simply just jumps back and forward. We don't really have any issues here, we just stay alive long enough for the final cutscene to trigger and we can move on. We finally get our first taste of what it's like to be a summoner as Yuna begins her tutorial section against the giant bird. So we summon Pidgeot to do our work for us, and she does incredibly well here. We balance out her gust attacks, or sonic booms in this case, with a few standard melee attacks, and eventually the bird goes down. What's interesting though is that after the tutorial section, you never actually see these birds again in Besaid. When you come back to do the monster capturing, they're not actually there, they're not a part of it. It's just something that I found interesting because we do see this bird again in other locations, but we just never see it here. Now that we have all the women we can access at this point in the party, the run can really begin. But the first thing that happens is Lulu is penalised by Waka for trying to attack the coyote. Not a Girl becomes very annoyed because Lulu took his kill, so he kicks a briefcase, and then we're thrown into our first battle against Sin. I immediately switch out Not a Girl for Lulu so she can take down 2 of the spines. That way our team take less damage as we take down Sin's fin. Now the reason why I'm keeping Kimhari in here is simply because he doesn't usually get that much screen time, so I thought why not. I mean, he can only defend anyway, so he's basically just a pretty face as the girls do the work. Lulu is pretty much doing everything on her own at this point, and there's not really much that can cause us any issues. It's just a long drawn out fight, a constant back and forth trying to keep an eye on Lulu's MP, and also obviously Sin's HP itself. By the way, if you are enjoying this video so far, please leave a like and let me know in the comments if you're actually enjoying the commentary. I would really love your feedback, because this is the first time that I've actually done a commentary over the top of a video that I have edited. If you check out my Let's Play of Final Fantasy X, you can see that in the playlist tab. You will see that everything I usually do is in real time. I don't usually pre-record and then do a voiceover over the top like I'm doing now. So I am a little bit nervous, and I hope that everything goes well, because scripting is not really my thing. So please let me know what you think. Lulu has now managed to get the Finn's HP low enough so we can summon Pidgeot and use an energy blast to get the overkill. Now, as you can see, there really was no issues here. Usually you would use Wakka's Ball as well to do damage to the Finn, but we didn't need it. The problem, however, is now, because we have to use the boys to take down a really pissed off jellyfish. Now, usually by this point, Not a Girl and Wakka would have accumulated some extra Sophia levels on the grid, but we're not allowed to do that. So we are attempting to take this thing down with our base level stats and HP. We use Wakka's Dark Attack to blind it so we can try and avoid as many physical attacks as possible. However, its Blender attack can't be repelled by darkness, so we do take some damage. There is some back and forth here as we keep track of our HP and MP, because that is also incredibly low at this point, and we just have to hope and pray that we get some good RNG. It takes a while, but eventually we do take it down. But it wasn't enough. Sin still destroys Kilika, and there is nothing that anyone at this point can do about it. It is such a sad moment, and to see Yuna dancing and sending the souls of the dead to the far plane is truly haunting. It really is a beautiful scene that shows what life in Spira is really like, because Sin destroys everything in its path, and the summoners really are the light of these people's lives. After Yuna finishes performing the send-in, we need to make our way through Kilika Forest and to the temple to obtain the next aeon. But first, Not a Girl saves this little child from being dragged into the depths, and we are made to do Kimhari's Lancet tutorial. Now, this really isn't a big deal. All we need to do is get Kimhari to use Lancet once, just to trigger the next section of the tutorial, where then it will let us use Lulu to take it down with a couple of fires, whilst the boys sit back and let her do all the work. Whilst this was going on, I was thinking ahead to the battle with Lord Ochu, and I was debating whether to take it on before or after the temple. I decided to give it a shot beforehand, just so we can build up the girl's stats before we take on the next Sinspawn, and it really was a grueling battle, because we could only use Lulu as our offensive user and attacker. But even with Yuna as support, using Null Tide to help get rid of the effects of the water magic that it can cast, and also using Asuna to stop the poison, it really was a grueling fight. And I also completely forgot that Lord Ochu can fall asleep to recover its HP. So after a while I decided to summon Pidgeot, hoping that she would be strong enough and have the firepower to take it down. But I was wrong. I completely miscalculated, and unfortunately, even after an energy blast, Lord Ochu still stood and took down our Aeon. I was not happy and I just wanted to get out of this fight as soon as possible. Luckily enough, we was eventually able to take it down, with even using Yuna to attack a few times with her staff, even though she does almost no damage. After this, Lulu gets us through the rest of the forest, taking down everything else with ease. After this, we encounter the third Sinspawn of the run, Sinspawn Genax. I have no idea how to pronounce its name, I do apologise. So we're just going to call it Sinspawn's third hentai monster child. Anyway, we use Lulu to take down its tentacles first by throwing a few spells at it. And we use Yuna again as support just to keep Lulu alive. We keep attacking until we are able to destroy the tentacles, and then we target the main body and wait until it opens its armour. Once that happens, it becomes extremely vulnerable, and all we have to do is be aware of its poison attack. We decide to summon Pidgeot to take it down using one energy blast, which gets the overkill. After our girls once again prove that they don't need no man, we head to Kilika Temple, where we run into another lady, Summoner Donna. We then do the Cloister of Trials, where we grab the red armlet that we will never use, and we call Evrae Flareon. Unfortunately, he won't be getting any screen time in this run because he is in fact a boy summon. Our party gets on another boat where Not a Girl performs the Jack shot, which honestly, this is only like the second or third time that I've actually done it, because this is a minigame I suck at, so I decided to keep it in. Next we arrive in Luca, where we meet antagonist Magus Seymour and his very pretty violet eyes. And whilst the boys are getting ready for their blitzball match against the Bhed Sykes, Not a Girl has this super cute moment with Yuna, and Kimhari gets into a bar fight with these two Ronso. Now later on in the run we will be forced into a solo boss fight with Kimhari against these guys, but luckily enough they level up alongside him, so there is no concern with the fact that we're not using Kimhari's sphere grid. After this we find out from Lulu that Yuna has been kidnapped by the Bhed Sykes, because apparently they are that bad at playing with their own balls. Now when I first went into this boss fight, I really wasn't that worried, because Lulu had been pretty much doing this entire run so far on her own, with a few bits of support here and there from Yuna. However, I was completely wrong. I was not prepared for this fight at all, and we got taken down again and again and again, to the point where I truly believed that I had soft-locked my own game and I wouldn't be able to progress from here. I really was concerned. Then I had a moment of clarity when I realised that all I needed to do was go back to just before the save point, and I could grind against the small Bhed mechs. When I did this, I increased Lulu's HP by 200 and increased her defense by 2, and with Not a Girl and Kimhari there sucking up some damage from the Obliterator's attacks, I was eventually able to take it down. However, this boss also got wise to my tactics and started using Mute Ball against Lulu, causing her to be silenced. So during this time I had to alternate between using her Thunder Magic, healing myself with Echo Screen, and making sure that I had high potions. Not only that, but I realised as I was going on that Lulu was losing a lot of MP, so I also had to keep an eye on that as we were going along. It really was a grueling fight, and I ended up losing round about 5 or even 6 times, I think it was, to my count. It was ridiculous how many times I lost to this thing, and the majority of it was simply time management, stat management, and keeping an eye on our MP and making sure that we had enough high potions to finish the fight. In a normal run, you would get Not a Girl to use the crane after Lulu has cast a few thunder spells on it to do serious damage to the mech, but because we can only use the girls in this run, I wasn't able to do that, so I had to find another way to deal with this problem, and it really was a problem. I have never had this many issues with this boss whilst playing this game. We then go check in on the boys and their Blitzball game, and honestly, Blitzball is my least favourite of the Final Fantasy minigames. It's not my thing at all, and I just couldn't wait for this match to be over. Personally, I am a triple triad girl, but I did try my best to try and win the game. We ended up getting 2 overtimes, and they beat me, but it was only by 1, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. We are then made to do some underwater battles with the boys where we fight Finding Nemo and his very angry friends, and then Auron becomes a member of the party after slicing a fiend in half. We let Not a Girl have his meme moment because he's feeling left out, and we make our way along the Mi'ihen Highroad where we run into Lady Belgemine and engage in our first summoner duel. Now, I absolutely love these fights. They are so much fun, and the reason for that is because they remind me of Pokemon battles. Now, I'm sure you can tell as well, considering the names that we've given the aeons, that I am a big fan of Pokemon. So fights like this are right up my alley. Not only that, but it's not actually a difficult fight. As long as you follow the guidance that's given by Belgemine, even first time players can take down Evrae with ease. Pidgeot simply shields when Evrae is using its Meteor Strike and then attacks with melee damage in between. It's just a simple back and forth until Pidgeot is able to use its overdrive, getting the overkill with Evrae. After the battle, I continue to make my way down the Mi'ihen Highroad, and as I do, I start to think about the bosses that are coming in the near future. The first one being the Chocobo Eater. Now honestly, I wasn't that bothered whether we beat the beast or whether it knocked us off the cliff. I was just curious to see if between them, Lulu, Yuna and Pidgeot had the firepower to actually take it down. So the first thing I did was get Lulu to cast a fire spell just to get a lay of the land and see how much general damage that we could do. And then, remembering that Pidgeot had a full overdrive gauge, I decided to summon her and hit it with everything that we had. We did over 3,000 damage and knocked it down, but it still wasn't enough to push it back towards the cliff. Now I couldn't understand why, because I was pretty sure that there was a certain HP limit to be able to push it back, but clearly I was wrong. Even with the use of a second overdrive, Pidgeot just couldn't take the heat and was eventually taken down. We fall back on Lulu, who uses her overdrive, and we do knock it over, but unfortunately we just don't have the power necessary to push this thing over the cliff. So we sit back, we take the loss, it is what it is, and we move on to the next stage. Now I start to think about the roadblock that is Sinspawn Gui. Now at this particular stage it can be considered quite the roadblock because the difficulty level seems to ramp up to 100 at this particular stage, which is also why I think that the encounter rate on Mushroom Rock Road is as high as it is. It's almost trying to encourage us to level up our characters as much as we possibly can, so we have some kind of preparation for the boss fight ahead. Lulu and Yuna have absolutely no problem wiping out everything in their path, and even though we have some problems with the mushrooms, which are a pain in the arse no matter what kind of playthrough you're doing, to be perfectly honest with you, we make our way to the encampment and we face off against Sinspawn Gui. Now honestly, I wasn't really that worried here, because after dealing with the Obliterator and the trouble we had with that, I was quite confident that Lulu would be able to do this on her own, with only the support of Yuna in the background, keeping her alive with Cure and using Null Shock to prevent the thunder attacks that it can use on the party. Also, you may be wondering why I decided not to use Pidgeot in this fight, and that's because in the next section we have a real problem, and honestly the second part is what I was more worried about. The reason for this is because Yuna doesn't have any way to attack, and we can't use Seymour or Oren, who are also forced into the battle because, after all, they are both men. So the only means of attack that we have in the second stage is to use Pidgeot. So this is the reason why I'm not using her in this fight, and we are simply using Not a Girl as a sponge to take some damage away from us. Luckily enough, that helps quite a lot. We get Lulu to keep casting her magic spells on its head to prevent it from using venom, and then we continue to cast on its belly. We can completely ignore the arms because they don't react to magic, so therefore they don't absorb any of the damage. And with a few overdrives and some persistence, along with the support of Yuna with her curing spells and her null shock, we are able to take it down. We watch as Sin absolutely destroys the Crusaders. Another heartbreaking scene as we witness the destruction of those who are trying to protect Spira. And now it's time for the part of the fight that I was actually the most concerned about. As you can see, like I said, you are forced into the battle with Seymour and Oren, who can't do anything. Now usually Seymour could take down this thing in just a few hits with his magic, but we have to summon Pidgeot to do the fighting for us. Now luckily enough, once again, her overdrive gauge was maxed out, which was an absolute saving grace. Now I put a bet on here to see if we could take it down in one hit, and unfortunately that wasn't the case, although we did get the overkill on the head and the arms, even though we didn't really need to touch the arms, but you know, we'll take it anyway. After that we get Pidgeot's overdrive gauge up again, and we use another energy blast to take the beast down. Now honestly, this was one of the easier battles. I don't know why, maybe it was just because I was pre-prepared, but either way, it was quite easy. We then do the Cloister of Trials at the Doge Temple, where we grab ourselves a magic sphere, and we get our next Aeon that we call Blitzel. Unfortunately, he can't be used, so he has to stay in the box for the rest of the run. We then run into Belgemine and we fight her version of Ixion, and honestly, this fight was so easy. It's an absolute pushover. Now I don't know if it's because I was slightly over leveled here or not, or whether I just got lucky, but it just seemed to go down so easy compared to the last time I fought it. Even when Pidgeot ended up in the yellow, I wasn't concerned at all because I knew that one more overdrive would get the overkill. After this we ride the Shoepuff across the Moonflow, and Yuna once again gets kidnapped by the Owl Bhed, forcing us to do combat with Not a Girl and Waka underwater against the Extractor. Now I really didn't think that this boss would cause me so much trouble, but just like the Obliterator, I was not prepared for what was going to happen in this fight. Now, in a normal run, the boys would be easily able to take this thing down due to their stat increases. However, because only the girls have access to the sphere grid, we got taken down again and again and again and again, and there really wasn't much I could do about it at this particular time. I was at a loss and I had no idea how I was going to be able to take this thing down. The boys just could not handle its depth charge, and we wasn't able to deal enough damage to be able to get it to lower itself down to prevent the attack. Not only that, I ended up getting stuck in a repetitive revive and die cycle, so there was some attempts where I had to give up the fight completely because I just couldn't break that cycle. After getting some outside help, I equipped Tidus with a lightning based weapon. Unfortunately I didn't have one for Waka, so he had to stick with his normal weapon, and I also equipped them with Dark Ward armour, as Dark was also causing me some problems because whenever there was good RNG and I was able to get 2 hits in at a time, I ended up missing because of the Dark status. Now, this was a really challenging fight, probably the hardest so far, due to all of these issues. And to be honest with you, I still think that it was pure luck that I was able to beat it when I did. And this was attempt number 10. That's how long it took me to take this thing down, but eventually we got the win. I went and grabbed myself some pizza and I turned off the game. When I come back, we get reunited with Rikku after finding out that she was the one who was actually inside the Extractor during that boss fight, and she becomes a permanent member of the party. We do her little tutorial, which is super cute because of how expressive she is, and Waka gets a little bit scared of her due to her ability to cast Firestorm, which again is a nice little touch in the narrative. After a little bit of level grinding, we arrive at Guado Salam. The events of the game continue as Yuna receives a marriage proposal from Seymour. We then make our way through the Thunder Plains, which was completely uneventful due to the fact that the girls were able to destroy everything in their path. After that, we make our way to Macalania Woods, where we prepare for our Macalania boss rush. Now, the first one that we face, as you can see, is the Sphere Morph. And honestly, I don't think that there's a problem fighting this boss. I know that people don't like the mechanic where it can change its elemental form and you can only do damage to it with the opposite element that is casting at the time. So I do understand why people don't like this boss, but me personally, I don't find it an issue. I simply get Rikku to attack the Sphere Morph so I can see what element it is using by forcing it to do a counter magic attack. After that, I simply get Lulu to attack with the opposite element that it is casting to deal damage. With Yuna there as well, being able to cast her null spells and able to keep the party afloat with Cure, it turns out to be a really easy battle. Even with Press, the Sphere Morph's melee attack, it's not really that much of a problem, as again we have Rikku who can heal with high potions and other means of medical supplies, and we have Yuna as our healer. So after a while and a little bit of back and forth, we take the Sphere Morph down with almost no problem, and we move on to our next boss, the Bhed Mech. Now, this is one of those fights that can go horribly wrong, even if you know what you're doing, and the reason for that is because of the little satellite, the Negotiator, especially in a run like this where magic is your main form of attack. That little thing can cause many problems because its function is to stop you from using magic and summons, but once you get rid of it, the mech is then able to use its most powerful ability, the Mana Beam. And the only way that I could think of surviving this without it causing too many problems was to summon Pidgeot, get her to use a overdrive to do as much damage as possible, and then take the full force of the Mana Beam. Other than that, it wasn't an issue, and the girls were able to take it down almost as easily as the Sphere Morph. Next we move on to Seymour. This first boss fight against Seymour is intimidating no matter what kind of run you are doing, and the reason for that is because the difficulty level seems to ramp up to 100. However, if you break it down into its simplest components, it's not actually that difficult to manage this boss fight. Like for example, as you can see here in the first stage, all we need to do is get Rikku to throw a petrify grenade, and then we poison Seymour and eventually he takes himself down. When this happens, he then summons Anima. Now again, Anima does seem very scary on the surface. It does have the move Pain, which is an insta-kill, but with the 3 girls here and 2 of them being avid healers, we can simply revive with Phoenix Downs and heal with Cure, and we can get Lulu to attack until we feel comfortable enough to be able to summon Shiva. Shiva is very quick and very powerful at this particular stage, and she is more than capable of handling Anima. She is immune to its pain ability. You can use shield if you want to, but it isn't really that necessary unless it is using its overdrive oblivion. But as you can see, Shiva is able to deal some massive damage here with her overdrive, meaning that Anima, even though as scary as she looks, it's not really that much of a problem. Here it used its overdrive attack, and as you can see, Shiva survived with 17 HP, but unfortunately she was taken down. However, she kind of did us a favour here too, because that means we didn't lose any member of the party as we went into the third and final stage. There isn't that much difference between the third stage and the first. All we need to do is make sure that Yuna is casting all of her null spells to protect us from Seymour's onslaught of elemental attacks and whittle down his HP. I didn't actually poison him in this stage, even though I could, but we took him down anyway. We call Shiva Frostlass. We grab ourselves the Luxosphere in the temple, and we move on to the Wendigo boss fight. Before we do anything, we take down the Guado with a Petrify grenade, just like we did in the first phase of the Seymour fight, and then we are just left with the Wendigo. With the Guado out the way, it will not be berserked, it will not have Protect put on it, and it will not have Shell casted on it either, leaving it completely defenseless to our elemental onslaught. Now, usually this thing will counter with some really heavy melee damage when you hit it with a physical attack, but because we're predominantly magic users and Rikku can use elemental items to do damage, all we do is put it to sleep and whittle down its HP. It really isn't that big of a deal, and the Titan goes down in a matter of minutes. After this, we arrive at Beaconell Island, where we are separated from the rest of the party. We are forced into battle with Not a Girl, who can only defend until the appearance of Auron, who can still only defend. We wait for Lulu to arrive and save the boys with her lightning attacks, and she can easily take this beast down. At this point, Lulu is so overpowered that it doesn't really matter that it has heightened elemental defense, because she is still able to solo this beast, just like she has been doing throughout the entire run so far. This was also a reason why the events of the Thunder Plains and Macalania Woods were so uneventful, because she was just slaying everything in her path. Even though here, as you can see, she ends up getting status effects, it still doesn't hinder her at all, and she eventually takes it down. And we reunite with Rikku and the rest of the party. Now, before we get to the Bhed home, I decided to stick around in the desert for a while to do a little bit of grind. Not just to bring up our sphere levels, but also because some of the beasts here have some very special items that are going to be really handy in the coming battles. For example, as you can see here, the girls battle the sandworms. They take them down really easy, but we are able to get some shadow gems. After this, we take on the Sangoras, which are an absolute nightmare due to the fact that they are able to make us confused, but luckily enough, Lulu again is able to take them down with her magic and the fact that she has Death Touch on her weapon at the time. We get to the Bhed home, where we fight some false battles. Unfortunately, we do have a little bit of trouble here because we get a bit overpowered by melee attacks, but we go back in full force and I equip the Stone Touch weapon, which makes our lives so much easier. Whilst we're here, we also do a little bit more item grind because the chimeras have elemental items which are really handy, and again they go down super easy with the use of Stone Touch, which honestly is going to be a very valuable asset in the battles to come, as well as the items we acquired. After this, home is unfortunately blown to pieces and we escape on the airship, where our next battle is with Evrae, one of the most intimidating bosses you can face in a run like this. Unsurprisingly, my first attempt goes horribly wrong and I die. There are many reasons why in a normal run, Evrae is such an intimidating boss. The first reason is because of its high HP. The second reason is because it has very heightened defences towards magical attacks. Then it has its Poison Breath attack, which can not only inflict poison, but deal massive damage to everyone in your party. It also has the ability Stone Gaze, which can petrify your party members, and it can do a swooping scythe attack if you are too far away from it and you pull back the airship for a long period of time. But that's not all, because as Evrae gets to a certain HP point, it will also cast haste. Now when you combine all of these elements together, you can understand why that even in a normal run, this boss is a problem. But in a challenge run like this, where you are handicapped and only able to use 2 members of the party, it becomes a real problem. With Lulu, she is unable to deal the maximum amount of damage that she normally would, because Evrae is resistant to all of her magic, and without Yuna, Rikku needs to take the role of healer as well as aiding Lulu in damage, but because she has such a little amount of strength and melee damage, she has to rely on elemental items as well, which again doesn't do that much damage. So it is a really scary fight, but somehow we managed to take it down. After defeating Evrae, we take down some flamethrower wielding Yevonites and we crash Yuna's wedding. I would like to take a moment though to mention this scene here with Yuna and Valefor. It's such a beautiful moment that really shows the bond between the summoner and her aeons, and like the graphics here are just wonderful. The whole thing, I just love it, and I just had to show it here. After that we do the Brevel Cloistral Trials and we get Bahamut, who we name Dratini. After this we find ourselves in the Via Purifico. Now sometimes this area can be a bit hit or miss depending on how you leveled Yuna, but luckily enough she has been a front runner in this challenge, so she is more than capable of slaughtering everything in her path. Even when we reunite with Lulu, we didn't really need to fall back on Lulu as much as I thought we would, because her aeons were able to deal enough damage to wipe everything out. After this we come across Isaru, who is our next boss fight, but it is a summoner's duel, and as I've mentioned before, I absolutely love these. Now the last time I did this in the Let's Play, I completely forgot that Isaru's Ifrit starts off with a full overdrive gauge. This time, however, I didn't forget, and I get Frostlass to use shield so we can tank the overdrive, and then it only takes 1 overdrive of our own to take Ifrit down. I don't think I've actually ever taken him down that quickly, so this was a big win for me personally. Our next battle is with Isaru's Valefor, and the only option we have is to once again summon Frostlass. Now honestly, I was surprised by how difficult this battle was, and it wasn't because Valefor was doing a lot of damage or because it was evading a lot of our attacks or anything like that. It was because it had a really surprising amount of HP, and its overdrive gauge seemed to go up really quickly. Luckily enough, Frostlass is more than capable of tanking its overdrives, especially by using shield. But as I say, I was surprised by how awkward it was, but eventually we do take it down and we face the last battle against Bahamut. Now once again against Bahamut we are forced to use Frostlass, and the reason for that is because unfortunately Pidgeot doesn't have the firepower to take it down as fast as we would want. Now for me personally, I don't find Bahamut that much of a threat, and the reason for that is because it doesn't actually attack. It will just stand and boost its overdrive gauge, and eventually it will use Mega Flare. But luckily enough, Frostlass is more than capable of tanking its overdrive, and we just use shield to put that bit of extra protection up, and also she has the ability to heal herself after those actions by using Blizzara. So just as suspected, Bahamut goes down very very quickly. We then move on to the underwater section of the Via Purifico, and honestly, this was one of the most frustrating sections of this challenge, and the reason for that is because we only have access to Rikku, and at this time, her melee damage is still abysmal, so she's having to rely mostly on items that she is able to gather through steel, and her defences are also quite low, so she did get taken down a lot. However, by the time we get to zombie Evrae, we get into some luck because it uses Stone Gaze on Not a Girl, and it only takes 2 Phoenix Downs to take it out. Now, after this, I did something really stupid. I stopped recording because I was doing some grind on the bridge before deciding to do the boss fight with Seymour Natus. But unfortunately, I completely forgot to record when I did attempt to take him down for the first time, which I did, but because I wasn't recording, I had to go back and do it again. That's when things got even worse because I didn't die just once, or twice, or 3 times. I got taken down 4 times by Seymour Natus after I got the first win. So the footage you're seeing right now is actually from attempt number 6, and honestly by this point I was getting extremely frustrated. I had been playing for around 5 hours, and the error with the recording and the fact that I lost 4 more battles against Seymour after that, it was really getting to me, and I just wanted this boss fight over and done with at this point, which I'm sure you can understand. However, what became even more frustrating is because Seymour decided he was going to constantly spam break. So I spent the majority of my time healing my party members from petrification. However, we did get a little bit lucky, as Seymour's parasitic little friend there, whose name I can't think of at the top of my head, usually it uses Shatter Claw on the party members that are affected with petrification to take them out of the battle. But he didn't actually do that in this boss fight. For some reason he kept attacking the party member next to the one who was petrified, so I think it was because of that that gave us the win. So, after all the drama that happened in Bevelle, we finally found our way to the Calmlands. Now, it was here that I realised our ladies were in for some trouble, and the reason for that is because everything from here onwards seems to have a lot of magical resistance, and since Lulu is currently still our main force of attack, I realised that we was going to have some problems in the future. So I decided to stick around and do some grind as well as doing some monster hunting to try and get our levels up. Even our aeons were having trouble in this situation, and as you can see here, we just couldn't take the Mulbros. It was an absolute nightmare, but eventually we managed to get some monster capturing done, and we moved on to the Calmlands boss fight against the Defender. The only real problem with the Defender is its Haymaker ability, where it's able to deal over 2,000 damage per hit, which at this stage is more than capable of taking down any party member instantly, unless of course you have Protect casted on them, or you have access to an armour that has SOS Protect. However, when taking on this boss with only the female members of the party, we can hit a real snag, because not only does Defender X have a ton of HP and really high defences, it is also resistant to magic. So this ends up becoming a real grind where we have to slowly chip away at its HP. We even lose our aeons in the process, as I'm just trying to deal as much damage as possible. However, eventually with some persistence we take it down and move on to the Cavern of the Stolen Faith. Now here we don't have any problems, as Rikku destroys everything with petrified grenades, and we also destroy Yojimbo with very little effort. Now here I make another stupid mistake due to the fact that I was tired and I'd been recording for such a long time. So instead of clicking to defeat the most powerful of enemies to get the cheapest range to obtain Yojimbo, I ended up clicking to train as a summoner, which means it was going to cost us a ton of extra money to obtain Yojimbo. So I decided I was going to go back to that later and take Kimhari into his solo battle against his Ronso rivals that he destroys with no problem. This then leads us to the peak of Mount Gagazet, where we are made to fight the notorious Seymour Flux. Now honestly, I had no plan going into this boss fight. I just hoped that I was able to deal enough damage before it used total annihilation. Luckily enough, both of our aeons had maxed out overdrives, so they were able to deal a massive quad 9 damage before they were banished by Seymour. I was also able to easily deal with the zombification by having Yuna use Esuna or have holy water from the items to be able to deal with that, so then when Seymour used full life it wouldn't do any damage to the party. Not only that, but I was really lucky in finding a merchant along the pathway up Mount Gagazet who had a weapon for Lulu that had magic boost. This meant that Lulu was able to do at least 5,000 damage per hit, which was absolutely incredible. Also, with it being poisoned as well, it was causing damage to itself with every move it made. I also wasn't that concerned about Seymour Flux casting Reflect on itself and using Flare, because I simply got Yuna to dispel the Reflect, so every time he cast Flare he would actually damage himself, meaning that is more of a W for our team. However, I was still extremely concerned about total annihilation. I was really worried that our HP was not high enough to be able to withstand that, so throughout the entire battle I was paranoid as all heck, and as you can see here, Yuna was taken down to 44 HP. That's how close this fight came to ending. Then the worst thing that could have happened did happen, as Seymour prepared to use another total annihilation, and I was really worried that we was going to get a game over, but luckily we was able to take it down with Rikku using a fire gem before he was able to do that, and we got the win. After the huge relief that is winning that boss fight, I decided to stick around Gagazet and do some more monster capturing, as we will need all of the monsters from Gagazet as a part of the mission to obtain the Magus Sisters later on. During this time, I decided to move Rikku over to Not a Girl's Sphere Grid because we were going to need a huge melee boost, and right now Rikku was at a massive disadvantage. After this, I continue my way to the peak of Mount Gagazet, where I run into the Spectral Keeper. Now for me personally, this boss is really unmemorable. Every time I play through the game, I tend to forget that this thing is even here, so I just walk into the battle completely in my own little world and forget it's even happening, so I basically just blitz my way through it as quickly as possible. I didn't have any other plan other than cast Reflect on it just in case it started using Curaga on itself, but other than that there wasn't really much to say about it. We just threw everything we had at it, and at the end I decided to summon Frostlass, who ended up taking it down with a overdrive. Very simple, very easy, we took it down in one fell swoop and we moved on. We then play some Tetris in the Zanakan Ruins Cloister of Trials, and after this I reach the true roadblock of this challenge. Honestly, the Spectral Keeper was an absolute game changer. I had to set aside the game for an entire week because I thought the challenge was over. I battled this thing so many times that there wasn't even enough space for me to edit everything in, otherwise this video would at least have an extra 20 minutes on top of what it already is. I lost so many times. I tried every tactic I could possibly think of and nothing was working. I even put on Berserk Walled Armour on my girls, but as you can see here, in spite of that, they were still afflicted with the status, and what made it worse was that he seemed to only target Yuna and Lulu, meaning that I had to rely on Rikku for damage because the other girls couldn't do it. This became a real problem, and honestly the only reason why I was able to beat it, I'm pretty sure, came down to luck, because you'll see in a moment that I moved the team behind the Spectral Keeper, and for some reason it never turned back round again for a while, meaning that we wasn't getting hit by its counterattacks. So this was pure luck here, and I was able to do some serious damage to this thing. And as you can see as well, the glyph mines didn't affect us either, so I got really lucky, and I just wanted to make sure that I could take this thing down by summoning Frostlass and dealing some extra damage. Now I hope that this would be enough, and I hope that she was going to be able to tank the counterattacks, but unfortunately we even lost Frostlass in this fight. This whole section was an absolute shit show, and I was really considering giving up the challenge here, but we got so lucky with Spectral Keeper not turning around and giving us free hits that we ended up winning the fight, and I was finally able to move on to Yunalesca. And to be honest with you, after the drama that was the Spectral Keeper, I went into the fight against Yunalesca with no worries whatsoever.
Fate is in your hands.
Now, just like it was with Seymour and Anima, Yunalesca can seem very intimidating on the surface, especially because she is a 3-stage boss. However, when you break her down into her smaller components, just like we did with Seymour and Anima, you'll realise that she's not actually that big of a threat, and the only reason why she seems that way is because of the amount of annoying status effects that she can inflict on your party. Also, she is able to counter, which causes an annoying amount of chip damage that when you become zombified in the 2nd stage due to Hellbiter, makes it very difficult to manage your HP. Now the thing is as well, trying to cure your party of zombie is the worst thing that you can do with Yunalesca. You must keep your party zombied, so that way when you take down her 2nd stage and she casts her ability Megadeath, your party becomes immune to that, and therefore you will not get a game over in one fell swoop. However, as you can see, the problem becomes managing that HP, because you are unable to heal yourself, and she does have the ability to cast Curasia on your party as well as casting Regen. It can cause a little bit of a problem if you don't manage that well. Now what I did is I had Rikku unzombied. That way I could keep her HP up without there causing any damage, and yes, okay, so she got taken down by Megadeath, but at least then, if the other two got taken down because of zombie and because of the chip damage, I would have someone there as a backup to be able to use the Mega Phoenix and revive them. Luckily enough, Yunalesca used Hellbiter quite a few times during this fight, meaning that the party always had at least one person who was zombified. As you can see here, she used Megadeath more than once, and it did get really heated for a while there, but that was because I got distracted and I lost focus on keeping an eye on the chip damage that was being done. But luckily enough, despite this, we managed to pull through, and I took down Yunalesca with Lulu. And now I was able to prepare the party for the final battle. Now the first thing I did was return to the Zanarkand ruins to obtain the final destruction sphere, and then I went to the Calm Lands to get Yojimbo. Now I had enough money to do so, even though he wasn't going to be an active member of the party. I called him Honedge after the sword Pokemon, and then I moved on to Barge Temple. Now before we could obtain Anima, I ended up having to face the Squiggly Cthulhu monster from the beginning of the game, and as you can see, the first time I fought him I had the weirdest game over I have ever had. It took himself down because it was poisoned. However, it had Rikku in its stomach, so as it spat it out, it took out our entire party, but we ended up getting the game over. I don't understand how that happened, because technically it died before it used its attack, so we should have got the win. So I don't really know what happened there, but when we went in for the second round, we didn't really have any problems. We cast poison on it, we used loads of elemental gems on it to cause a ton of damage. Rikku was able to take this thing down on her own, and she absolutely smashed it. Inside the temple we meet with Seymour's mum, who happens to be the faith for Anima. We call Anima Mew because Mew is the mother of all Pokemon, and then we return to the Calm Lands to obtain the Magus Sisters, the final female members of the party. I named them Uxie, Azelf and Mesprit after the 3 legendary Pokemon from the Sinnoh region, and now we are ready to face Sin. Breaking through Sin's armour was an absolute cakewalk. It really was the easiest fight of this run. The girls are so overpowered by this point, and also the fact that Lulu and Yuna both have double cast, we was able to take down its arms, as well as the Sinspawn on its belly, and the final flowery butthole in no time at all. It was unbelievably easy, which was a saving grace considering the amount of painful bosses we've had to face so far. Sin then crash lands into the heart of Bevelle and prepares itself for round 2. Now honestly, this part of the battle can be a little bit scary, and the reason for that is because Sin itself doesn't actually do anything other than boost its overdrive gauge. However, when the overdrive gauge becomes full, it is an instant kill. No matter what you do, it's game over if it reaches that stage. Luckily enough, as I said, the girls are very powerful at this stage, and even though we have to wait for it to come closer for Rikku to enter the battle, it's still really not that much of an issue. I decide here, just to ensure our victory, to summon the Magus Sisters, and there is nothing in the rules that says I can't, because they are in fact female aeons, and they are the ones that get us the win, and then we are pulled inside of Sin itself. Inside Sin is where we fight Seymour for the final time. Now this boss has a very interesting mechanic, and I'm not talking about the fact that you hit these circle rings around it to change its elemental abilities. I'm talking about the fact that when it charges itself up to use Ultima, it actually lowers its defense, making it easier to attack. Now this is something that really comes in handy, because at the start of the match, his base defense stat is absolutely ridiculous. It's like 150 or something like that. So the fact that it drops down every time it uses Ultima really makes this battle easier. Now, what I did to avoid the team getting wiped out by Ultima, simply because I wasn't sure if they would be able to tank it or not, I ended up bringing in Pidgeot here to tank the first Ultima, and also she was able to get in a few hits as well, which comes in handy. We did end up losing her, but she was a noble sacrifice. Now at this stage, I wasn't really concerned, even though I should have been, because not long after this happens, Seymour starts to charge a second Ultima, and because I was getting a little bit cocky due to the tactics that I was using was really working well, for example getting Yuna to use her null spells to make us immune to most of its elemental attack, I thought that we was going to be able to handle this, and it was actually quite a big mistake on my part, because when Seymour used Ultima, he was actually able to take down not one but two of our party members, and at this stage I got incredibly worried because I thought that he was going to attack with a normal elemental spell after this. However, we got really lucky, and Lulu was able to resurrect the rest of the team with a Mega Phoenix and then take down Seymour with a double Thundaga. After this, I decided to stick around for a while and do some grind, and what you're seeing here are the final baseline stats before I went to challenge the final boss. But before that, we have to run around the most annoying section of the game, avoiding crystals that cause you to go into random encounter fights that you can't escape, whilst collecting little glowy orbs. I don't know why this is a thing, and it's personally really annoying, but it is what it is. The first few times fighting Jekt, I had a lot of problems, and the reason for this is because when you go into the fight, you are forced to use Yuna, Auron, and not a girl, and unfortunately I had some really bad RNG, and I wasn't able to swap out the boys for the girls to back Yuna, and I ended up getting taken down because he was using his Eject Beam, which was causing petrification on Yuna, meaning it was an instant game over. The second time, as you saw, I ended up getting taken down by his Overdrive, and when I came to the final attempt, I was trying to think of a way to get around these problems. Now what I did is, as soon as the battle began, I summoned Frostlass. Now the reason for this was to avoid any potential petrification caused by his Eject Beam, and also cause some damage in the meantime. Now this did work for the most part, however, Jekt ended up using another Eject Beam, hitting not a girl and taking him out of the fight, meaning I only had the opportunity to use two party members, and I had to choose from either Rikku or Lulu to take the place of Auron. Just like I did with Frostlass, I summoned Pidgeot to use as a shield, so that way I could safely move Auron out of the fight and move in Lulu. Now Lulu put a poison status on Jekt, which was really handy. Unfortunately, we wasn't able to use Zombie because that was on Riku's weapon and she wasn't in the fight, but I settled for Poison. However, I got really concerned that I wasn't going to be able to do this with two party members, so I decided to summon the Magus Sisters. 3 female party members who can deal a massive amount of damage. And yes, okay, it can be considered a cop-out, but I was refusing to do another reset due to losing not a girl and being unable to move our third girl into the party. Now for the most part, this was going really well. The girls were able to tank the majority of Jekt's attacks, and because they are immune to petrification and other status effects, it really wasn't that much of a problem up to this point. I was able to deal massive amount of damage, but even here you can see that the girls really did suffer at the hands of Jekt, ended up going into the yellow even though we were dealing a substantial amount of damage, but eventually after an overdrive we did get the overkill and Jekt goes down. In the endgame, none of our party members are able to die, meaning it's impossible to get a game over. So now, it's time to answer the question, can I beat Final Fantasy X using only the girls? And technically, the answer is no, due to the fact you are forced to use the boys in some incidences. However, for the most part, as you can see, I was able to get through the run only using female characters. I really want to say thank you to everyone who came and watched this video. I put so much effort into this challenge and it was so much fun to do, even though I did get frustrated at times. Please let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the video, as this is my first voiceover commentary and it really did take a lot of effort to make, so I hope it was worth it and you enjoyed it. Thank you very much everyone, I appreciate you all. Like, love, sub, and I'll see you soon.